Let's look at the events this morning in more detail with political analyst Professor Susan Booysen, who joins us in the studio. Prof, always good to have you. I think some of us had to pinch ourselves today when we saw Jacob Zuma appear in court on these charges after 13 years.
Indeed, it was a big wake-up call. There is former President Zuma actually standing in the dock. But then, I think it is a brief moment, a brief little interregnum there, because by all indications, even the argument Billy Downer acknowledged and presented there in court, there will be further reviews. It's subject to review. And Zuma, when he spoke in his post-court address outside on his little stage there, said that if this case goes ahead and if I'm prosecuted. So he, in his own mind, is still certain that he has quite a few tricks up his sleeve. So I think whatever possibilities remain for further delays, further requests for reviews, further appeals of denied requests for reviews, etc., he and his legal team will find those little loopholes.
Susan, talk to us a bit about what he had to say outside court.
That was fascinating. You know, in the first place, let's acknowledge the rogues gallery that he had with him. Rogues gallery, former ministers, the ones who didn't retain their positions for good reasons in Ramaphosa's first cabinet reshuffle, and then a serious number of fringe organizations, religious organizations like the CRA and the Interfaith Commission. Yes, they've been there, but they really blossom now that they can become Zuma supporters, and marginal business associations. So it's not as if civil society and religious leaders were there in support. Those were fringe and marginal groups. And Zuma had his audience right eating out of his hand there. And I found it rather disconcerting, some aspects of it. For me, I could read veiled little threats in there, and sometimes not so little. Like on 2 occasions, he repeated the exact point. Like the current leaders of the ANC, so implied, they might be sorry that this case actually happened. He said that on 2 occasions. And there was a stirring up of sentiment, sometimes subtle, sometimes rather blatant. And there was a serious racial connotation in stirring up there, those sentiments, and there was this continuous thing about Jacob Zuma is innocent, without him saying, I didn't take money, I didn't accept this bribe. He was still continuously playing on those judicial processes and procedures, guilty until proven innocent, innocent until proven guilty, I beg your pardon, and supremacy of the law and equality before the law, whereas he has used every bit of taxpayers' money in sight to ensure that he would be elevated above the law. I saw a person in court there who was in court but was not subjecting himself to due process, and that came out very strongly in the speech that he presented there.
You know, in the last few minutes, we're hearing that President Cyril Ramaphosa has pulled out and withdrawn from the personal costs order case, which Jacob Zuma was challenging as president. So you've spoken about all the litigation that he could possibly bring in the next few months as former president to delay this process.
Yes.
Can he actually afford to do that, Susan?
I honestly believe he can afford it. He will, of course, plead poverty, but I think that might be as disingenuous as some of his defenses in court and in other adjacent processes beyond today have been. I really think he has got more than enough resources to fund legal defenses in almost ad infinitum. But it is one of the small constraints that there is, that little golden tap from the state, from state funds, could and absolutely should be closed down. But I have little doubt that he can afford, and I believe that the way I read the situation is that now that he's not president anymore, he doesn't have those full accountability and transparency annual declarations of who donated what to me as former president. He hasn't got those obligations anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised if some benefactors just step in, and after they possibly had benefited immensely from previous public sector contracts, and step in and sponsor future defences. So even if he's very likely to plead poverty, I cannot see that he will be restrained by legal costs.
Susan, there was one thing we were watching carefully, and that was to see what sort of turnout there would be outside court today,
yes.
because many people are wondering what support base remains behind Jacob Zuma at this point. How do you answer that question?
Yes, it was interesting for me that we never quite saw the definitive size. So far I haven't seen the definitive size of that big crowd. So far I haven't seen the evidence of the 100 or 200 buses that would have perhaps transported people into town. There wasn't a groundswell like we saw in a run up to Polokwane, that we saw at his rape trial. That popular sentiment and endorsement, that visceral support was not there anymore. It was largely KwaZulu-Natal people, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was largely Durban people, and there was no way to differentiate between who was legitimately as a very strong pro-Zuma supporter in that crowd and who were the curious standby and onlookers there. And we do know that there were quite a few Durban University of Technology students in the crowd there, also at the vigil last night. So I do not think we have seen a groundswell of support supporting him at this court appearance.
Thank you so much for putting us in the picture. Lovely to have your analysis. That was Professor Susan Booysen from Wits University.